Great. Hey, so welcome everyone to our monthly meetup. Good to have you guys here. And this month is a special treat. I know for me personally, there's a lot of folks that have been in the job market this year that didn't anticipate being in the job market due to COVID. So Jennifer and Chris from G Squared agreed to meet with us, and they are recruiters who spend their full time doing this stuff, helping people out. And very much just agreed to volunteer their time. There's not a lot they're getting in return from this. It's just service to the community, where they can collectively help the group out. And we'll be recording this, so hopefully we can help out a group much broader than this as well as it gets passed around the internet land. So Jennifer, just real quick, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your background.
Absolutely. So hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. And thank you, Danny, for putting this together, for hosting. We are always excited to connect with the technology community. I know this has been a tough year for the usual year, and I've received a lot of different questions. So I thought this may be a good platform to reach the masses and, hopefully connect on these hot topics, things that have been on your mind. Just to give you a little bit of background about myself. So managing partner of G Squared Group. We are IT technology consulting, recruiting, and staffing company here in Atlanta. We've been in business. We just celebrated our 10-year anniversary, but have been in the industry for much longer than that. But we are primarily focused here in the Atlanta area. Of course, we have many clients that bring us outside of Atlanta, but this is our home. We work with many different clients from Fortune 50 to mid-sized companies to even some startup companies here in Atlanta and this region. So I realized, especially back in March when all of this happened, that we're in a unique position to be able to see the shifts and swings in the market. Being in the staffing industry. So being able to bring that intelligence and answer questions on how, candidates, how employers and how employees are reacting, and being able to bring some intelligence is really important to me. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Very, very awesome. And Chris, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, Chris Talamas. I work with G Squared. Just had my 2-year anniversary. Super excited about that. The time flew by. We're a high quality staffing company focused on the technology side, mainly in the Atlanta market. To her point, this year, there has been a lot of change. And I think that's something that's really important. We have to understand and accept that the market has shifted. And, internally, we had to change our strategy and have different kind of conversations with candidates and different kind of conversations with clients. So we're excited to be here. I've been in staffing for a little over 20 years and, love these platforms where we can provide some text on maybe some strategies you should be doing and some things that can help you with market conditions. And I want everyone to be positive, super optimistic. We are seeing some upticks in the market in many different areas, which we'll cover today, which is fantastic to hear. And, we're working with some great companies that are heading in the right direction. So we're super optimistic about the future, and we're going to touch on that a little bit today.
Yeah, well, I've had the chance to work with G Squared, beside G Squared, and be a part of the conversation off and on for it's been maybe 4 or 5 years, and just really impressed with what you guys pull together. But the thing that stands out the most to me about the culture there is that apart from so many of the other recruiters that I've been in touch with, you guys are always looking for those win-wins and trying to find out how to help people the most in their position, and really care. It's not just like a body shop where you're trying to, fill people up, but you really care about the people. So I have always appreciated that about G Squared. Awesome. So why don't we dive in? We've got a couple different topics that we want to get into. One, I thought we'd just start talking about how's the market changed, what's going on with that. And then maybe at some point we transition into how do you get noticed in the market that we're in. And then after you get noticed, what are some keys in that interview process to help you stand out and get through that? Some tips and tricks that you guys would have. So that was the general flow that we were going to take today. So Jennifer, just thinking here, I know you watch the market very closely. So how has COVID impacted our job market?
Sure. So, without a doubt, it's impacted it greatly. And, back in March, nobody could have expected that we would be in this situation, right? In March, April, essentially the job market shut down. The doors were closed, literally. And that persisted for a good 6 to 8 weeks as companies, kind of this wait and see mode, right? What are we going to do? Where is this going to take us? But since then, in about May timeframe, we've started to see a steady increase in really positive signs in the job market for sure, which is all very, very good. But we are in this new normal, and companies have, and employees and candidates have had to adapt and adjust and come to the realization that this is our new normal. But some of the biggest, market changes that we've seen. So we've shifted from an employee driven market, so candidate employee driven market, to more of an employer driven market. So this shift of power has been pretty dramatic and pretty quick. Now that shift I don't see is going to last forever, especially in the technology market. I think we'll start to see that supply and demand kind of shift back to our pre-pandemic levels, but it is going to take some time. But it has definitely, presented some challenges and some interesting trends. So many companies here in Atlanta and all over the world furloughed, laid off candidates, which that led to an increase in supply in the labor market, right? And so that supply and demand just was not quite the balance that we're used to seeing. Employers have also changed their buying habits, right? They've changed how their projects are prioritized. So we've seen budgets change. We've seen where they're focusing change from both projects, from their initiatives, from a labor force change. They're focused on optimization and efficiency and stabilization, and digital transformation is in full speed ahead. And that's been a huge dramatic change on how quickly digital transformation has become the #1 priority for all companies. I think there's a statistic that I saw that we have experienced more growth in digital transformation in the past 3 months than we have in the past 11 years. Wow. So it has really, really forced a different mindset, a cultural change, and organizational shift. We're also seeing a reallocation of jobs. And I know, Danny, with digital AI, y'all really experienced a lot of that and seen it. So I'm sure you could talk more about how, that's impacted not just the job market, but priorities within companies and what they're doing around that. It's been really incredible to see. Reallocation of jobs. So we've seen a massive reallocation from some economies to others, right? Certain roles that have had a big boom, certain industries that have had a big boom, and just this general shift to, certain industries, certain economies, and even a lot of people getting into technology right now. But I think the biggest change in the job market has been the impact of our virtual world. So, and that's here to stay for a while. So our remote workforce, our virtual job market, or some type of hybrid is going to be here for a while. It is. So that means that, hiring is going to look a little different for a while, and how you look for a job is going to look a little bit different. So companies and hiring managers have had to adjust their recruiting, their interviewing, their hiring, and their onboarding processes. And just the same, hiring managers, employees, and candidates have had to change and adapt how they search, apply, interview, and onboard. This has been pretty dramatic, right? Very, very dramatic. So virtual interviewing, that's the norm. Virtual networking has become the norm. Virtual onboarding has become the norm. So with this, this transition, it has led to longer interview cycles, longer onboarding cycles. As a lot of people are trying to balance work and home and life and dogs barking and, everything going on. So that has shifted how we engage, and it has also shifted these cycles for interviewing and onboarding. But we're also seeing, shifts in what clients are looking for today and what they're focusing on through the interview process. And a lot of it's been around soft skills. And, that's so important right now for remote work. It's a different environment, right? So communication, collaboration, technology proficiency, adaptability, resilience, positivity. These are the things that clients are more focused on now. Within, the interviewing. So it's really important to, to hone in there. And we'll talk a little more about that later, but I know Chris has some things to say on that, but we're also seeing a shift in those buying habits. So the market is demanding a more flexible, nimble workforce right now. So we expect to see an increase in contract positions. So I think it's really important to kind of get familiar with that and understand what that means to you and your lifestyle, right? And so the big takeaway is that everybody's having to adapt right now. So it's really extremely important that you stay flexible, stay nimble, stay positive, because there are some really good things that are going to come out of this, and we are already seeing a huge boom already, a big change in the market just in the past couple of months. So things are good. There are going to be things that are just going to stay around for a while, but there is certainly light at the end of the tunnel and very positive outlook.
That's great. So just kind of drilling down in that, in a very near term, like next 3 months, next 6 months. So Q4 is an interesting time, at least, from what I've observed in the job market, where some companies really kind of close the doors. They try to contain cost as much as possible. There might be some hiring freezes and stuff like that begin around November. Other companies have some budget to spend, and it's like, hey, let's spend this before year end. And it's always kind of a grab bag, company to company. Some are very hard to get into, others are not. Given that there's not been as much spend earlier in the year, do you see some pent up demand in Q4 as more of a hiring trend, or is it more of like, hey, we had some lack of sales, we need to cost contain, we'll look at Q1 to start to hire again? What are you seeing right now?
So I think it's a combination of both, right? And that is going to differ around the sector, the industry, but in general, from a macro perspective, the economists are cautiously optimistic. So we hear a lot about the V or the U or the W shape, right, from an economics perspective, but economists are saying, I think we're in more of a swoosh shape, right? We are, headed towards a general stabilization and growth. Unemployment continues to show modest declines. Of course, there's some industry sectors that are faring better than others. So financial services has fared pretty well. Technology services have fared well. E-commerce, logistics, supply chain. But I think that there's more confidence in the industry, and there is a little bit more optimism that we're not in a financial crisis, and right. So that, as well as getting used to the new normal and reprioritization of those budgets and getting just more comfortable with spend, is driving a lot of this, this confidence and demand. So just in the past several weeks alone, dramatic increases in job openings, dramatic. And it's not just, I think, the end of the year. I think that does have, part to do with that, but it's also around, the confidence level and just us getting used to this new normal too. Now, of course, there are differences based upon the sectors and the roles and the industries that kind of correlate into that.
Yeah, so maybe we jump into that for a second, and I guess we could talk specifically about the Atlanta market, one that you're intimately familiar with. But in that tech space, what's really growing in there? What are people hiring for? What kind of roles seem to be hot jobs right now?
Sure. So, we are very fortunate in Atlanta that we have a hotbed of different industries, different sectors. We have a huge financial services, fintech, logistics and supply. We've got a multitude of very diverse industry set here. And so that has really helped us to be a little bit more resilient compared to other large sectors, other large cities here in the US. So, of course, there are some varying differences again, but I will say that in March and April, when everything shut down, it quickly kind of started to come back. And we have seen such an acceleration of, job openings in the past 6 to 8 weeks, which is a really, really good sign. There are certain industries here in Atlanta that are doing really well, really, really well. I mean, we've got some major companies that, provide a lot of DIY products that is going on a lot right now. We've got companies that are manufacturing, PPE. We've got supply chain and logistics companies. So, these industries are still doing really well, and specifically in technology. So, technology has been very insulated to this pandemic as well, because we just have a natural capacity to be able to mobilize our workforce to work remotely. A lot of us in technology have been working remotely or have worked remotely for many years. But also there is this digital transformation that everybody's talking about. And so we're seeing roles, around this enabling of the digital transformation become in very, very high demand. These roles are like data analytics, data scientists, anything around cloud, around virtualization infrastructure, right? As well as, cybersecurity. We all know that's so important. E-commerce and Agile, right? So these roles are helping to enable and really accelerate the digital transformation. And this is on top of mind of all the companies. So that's not surprising. And we have a lot of these opportunities here in Atlanta, which is good.
Yeah, it's cool to see that trend. So Mick Kirsten's book, Project to Product, kind of signaled in, hey, if you're not involved in digital transformation, you're going to become a dinosaur. Like this is an age of transition. And so where agile transformation would have been a word that we heard 5 years ago, we're like, let's change our ways of working to better do what we're doing. Digital transformation ushers in, hey, let's change even what we're working on to make sure we're connecting with an online and in more of a digital presence. So it makes a lot of sense. So, but I love my agile roots. Heck, I'm agile guy through and through. I'm curious as far as agile roles go, like thinking about product managers, product owners, scrum masters, folks like that. Are there any that stand out as people are looking for those in particular, or is it slower on that front? How does it look for some of those agile roles?
So, change and transformation is, always a key buzzword, and it still continues to be a theme, but it's also while balancing, speed to the delivery, speed to market with stabilization, optimization, productivity, value streaming, right? And so those roles within Agile and people who can really align those values are really in high demand right now. So we are seeing a comeback for product management. We're seeing a comeback for Agile coaches. We're seeing, this scaled Agile for these large enterprise companies. And, how do we get in front of our buyers, our customers, right? How do the customer experience, change management is even big right now, and applying that to an Agile concept. So we are seeing a really big impact in these roles specifically, and we'll continue to see that grow because this is here to stay. Digital transformation is here to stay. And I think companies are really seeing a lot of value in that.
That's awesome. Very cool. Very cool. Well, transitioning in, so that's kind of a state of what's the market like. I'd like to maybe shift conversation a little bit and say, okay, given that's the market, it sounds like there's some optimism, but maybe I'm not getting noticed, or I don't even know how to get noticed. Maybe we could talk a little bit about that. And so one of the quotes that I've heard is that it's harder to be in the job market now versus the pre-COVID-19. And I know some of that's supply and demand, but specifically, what are you seeing as some challenges in our unique world right now?
Chris, you want to take that one?
Yeah, that'd be great. So I guess I'll on the recruiting side and the talent pool side. So it is harder now than it was pre-COVID. We had a unique situation where the market got flooded with great candidates, right? So you had a couple of different sectors that got hit pretty hard. The airline industry got hit hard, and some of the retail giants got hit really hard. And all of a sudden, you have an influx of outstanding candidates in the market, and there's no opportunities for them. So that, it's great on the recruiting side for us. We have a larger talent pool to choose from, but we still need opportunities to place them. So just accepting and understanding the market did change, and we saw that in the March, April timeframe. So I think we just had to re-engineer our strategy and re-engineer the way that we help these individuals and the conversations we had, and just give them ample strategies to make sure that they're successful, because the candidates in the market were experiencing the same thing as us, which is there was a lot less opportunity out there for them. Jennifer indicated we have seen an uptick, and we have seen a trend recently where more opportunities are starting to arise. It's interesting on the client side. They can be a little bit more selective, and they can take a little bit more time to find the right individual. And if they have a list of things they're looking for, they can be a little bit more patient in trying to find someone with everything in that context. So the hiring slowed down a little bit, and the process is a little bit elongated, but they're realizing that great people don't stay on the market for long, and we're trying to help educate them through those conversations of it is important to capture these great individuals while they're in the market in this time frame. So definitely had have a big shift in that regard.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's
Adaptable and flexible, right? And get creative. That is really important in having really good partners and a good network.
one thing I've recently I posted a requisition for a community manager that we're hiring over at digital.ai, and I had candidates from all over the world apply for it, which like 5 years ago that wouldn't have happened. It would have had, this position's located in whatever city, and only people that enjoyed that commute to that headquarters would have submitted. Is that something that you see continuing, where like people are more open to expanding geographically, looking beyond that? So maybe if you're used to doing your job searches within a certain radius, you might consider taking that off, or is that just more of a temporary thing that you think we'll go back to geographically based stuff?
I think it's subjective, right? It's subjective to the individual, and we've had individuals that it's hard to uproot a family and kids and schools and that type of thing, but we've also had individuals that are now more open and receptive to another location. Now, I will say clients are still remotely working, and in time they will slowly phase the individuals back in the office. But this goes back to Jennifer's point about being flexible and nimble, and being creative, and just really taking a step back and say, I want to make sure that I am able to enter the job market and identify the right company. Well, that right company may not be in the proximity where I live. So I think individuals are, really taking a self-assessment on, which direction they want to take their career with, and it may require them to make a transition. So to address your question, we have seen a little bit of an uptick with candidates applying from different states, but it creates some logistical challenges and elongated start dates. So I run the delivery team at G Squared, and I always try to counsel them to, let's try to find local individuals first. If we could, here in Atlanta, let's help the people that are here in our community. In the event we need to go outside, let's be flexible and look at some out-of-state candidates, but it does come with some logistical challenges.
And you raise a good point, Danny, is that just further complicates the competition, right? Because there is naturally this, we're in this remote work world, so I can work wherever, right?
Yeah.
So that opens a lot of doors and geographical boundaries that, so it does create a different type of challenge. One thing that we always say, though, is, and even our clients are asking for still local candidates, even though they're fully remote right now, and they may be for some time, just having that option of, if we go back to the office, you're going to be committed to coming back to the office, and you can come back to the office. That provides a little bit more comfort for clients, and especially for those that didn't previously have a remote culture before all of this happened. So, but I think it's also important for the candidates to, do a gut check yourself. I mean, be open-minded, be flexible, be nimble, but you got to think, if things go back to, fully on site, are you going to be able to do that? You got to look at that long-term commitment for yourself as well.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. It's an interesting dynamic. I feel like, we're still in this transition phase where people are like, what will 2021 look like after we get a vaccine? Is it going to go back to some semblance of what it was? Is it forever changed? And where does that go? So I could see kind of one foot in the water, one foot out of the water on that. Hey, one thing that I have noticed in our current year, 2020, as the economy is uncertain, usually you see a trend towards hiring more contractors. As the economy is stronger, usually it's more full-time people. So I would assume, and certainly at my company, we've looked at increasing staff through contractors as a key tool there. If people are getting calls about contract opportunities and they haven't done contract work before, what are some things they need to consider on that? What are some differences they might feel as they're open for work and have
Question, Danny, and I think it's a great topic for this setting. So I'll start to address it, and then we'll let Jennifer provide some guidance as well. It goes back to flexibility, right? So, it's also important to have a good relationship with a staffing partner as well to help through that transition. But companies are a little right now hesitant to hire full-time employees, so they may go the contract route and want to, try the resource out for a certain period of time. But what I always tell candidates is that a perm opportunity can end at any given time and could be considered temporary. So let's go in with the right attitude, positivity. Let's give this role, 150% of your time and effort each day, because it could turn into a full-time position. And as any situation you go into, you do have to prove yourself and you have to add value and you have to show value to the organization. So we may see this trend of let's get back to some contingent labor initially, and let's see how they do. And we've seen many situations where, we call from a client, hey, you placed this great resource. I know we're 5-6 months into the contract, but they're doing such a good job. We don't want to lose them. We want to go ahead and hire them in a full-time role. So my advice is have an open mind, be flexible. There are some variances between contract and perm roles. Some are significant, some aren't. But finding a good trusting partner that would help you through those transitions, and you work with clients that there is longevity in the role. There's a lot of work. There's a lot of projects. Because what you don't want to do is, if you're a lifetime employee of working full-time roles and you start on the contract path and you choose maybe the wrong organizations, what you don't want to have is 3 months in one job, 6 months in another role, and all of a sudden the stability on your resume gets questioned a little bit, and it's going to be a little bit harder for you to land your next role. Jennifer, do you have some context on that?
I think absolutely. As we transition, the market shifts. I think it's important to stay nimble, stay open-minded, stay flexible. In a contract role, and we use the term consultant, but it's not that scary. You just want to make sure that, or different, really. You just want to make sure that you have the right partner that you're working with, the right organization, the right role, that you're doing your due diligence, right? But also, the number one question I get is, am I going to have healthcare benefits? There are a lot of companies out there, staffing companies, recruiting companies that provide healthcare benefits, if you're a W-2 hourly employee, right? So there are things that you want to consider on to make sure that you're compensated, right? That, from a tax perspective, that you're, set up in the right way, whether that's a W-2 or if you have your own LLC. But the biggest thing is, stay flexible, stay open-minded. Healthcare benefits, many do provide those. So it takes it a little less scarier, right? But have a really good staffing partner, a really good recruiting partner that's going to help you transition to that, just like Chris said.
Yeah, and I think that is an important thing for people to wrap their head around. So the opportunity may be a contract with, brand X, but you're going through, oftentimes in that, through a staffing firm. So you're actually an employee for a staffing firm, eligible for benefits, depending on how big the firm is, that'll change the package and all that kind of good stuff. And so you get your paycheck from staffing company, but you spend your day-to-day and you get your direction for your job through the brand that's actually hiring you. So in that sense, it's a little less scary. It's not like you have to create your own business and you're, going through all that kind of stuff. So yeah, great point. Cool. Okay, great. All right. And somebody had asked about rates as far as that. I want to group that in just a little bit to a discussion just generally about salaries and rates together. We'll get to that in just a bit, but let's zoom back for a second and say, okay, here I am. I've been furloughed, or I've been laid off, or I'm in a mode where I need to find a new job. What's the best strategy for targeting that position? And what are some things that have helped people be successful for landing those new opportunities this year? And as you think into Q4, Q1 of the coming year? Chris, you want to jump in on that one? Yeah.
Yeah, that's another great question, Danny. I appreciate it. So it's sometimes overwhelming and daunting to think about how many tools there are out there to leverage, and where do you even start? How do I look? The market's different. There's more individuals in the market. So some of the generic advice we give candidates and consultants is, let's make a target list of maybe 15 to 20 companies that information about, you've done research about. Maybe some of your colleagues work at these organizations, but we want to make sure you have a clear focus on where you want to land your next opportunity. It's always important to be excited and passionate and really show a keen interest in, it could be a specific industry, it could be a specific type of role. We want to make sure that you're not trying to go after every single position and be everything to everyone. We want to make sure you have that clear focus, counsel individuals to really read through the job descriptions and make sure you understand what the roles are and make sure you know what you're applying for. And, as far as LinkedIn is concerned, we want to make sure you have a good profile up on LinkedIn, make sure it's accurate, updated, no spelling errors. We need a professional picture on there. These are all things that employers look for as well. But having that clear focus, I think, really helps. And then the biggest thing is networking, to be honest. We got to make sure that we're having conversations with a lot of our colleagues, paying attention to the market. There's a lot of great intelligence online. You can learn about what the industry trends are, who is hiring, a lot of updates every day around, individual landed a new opportunity at this company, and then you can look, it's like an organizational footprint. You can see all the different hiring points and see the right connections, but just paying attention to the market and having awareness around what companies are moving, what industry trends are happening, what technology shifts are occurring will help you align with the right companies.
That makes sense.
On that.
Yeah, and so around the platforms there, you had mentioned LinkedIn, and I know that back in the day, Monster.com was the place, or Career Builder. There's a lot of different sites out there. Do you see any of those as where you should target your time more than another? A lot of times when you're looking for a job, people start out just doing a shotgun, and it's like I just need to be busy. But then there's a point where it's like I need to be busy doing really things that bring a return, like sending 200 random resumes that I never hear back from is pretty discouraging. So are there platforms that you'd recommend focusing on?
So we
mute her.
We are a big fan of LinkedIn. It's outside of our internal database and networking, it's the only tool we use. And very clean site. It's easy to use. You can download your resume and it's a one-click easy apply. But we spend, and then there's user groups you could join in specific technologies and companies. Have profiles that you can view of all the different hiring points at that organization. Forms, you mentioned Monster, and there's Dice, Career Builder. We personally don't use those specifically, but there's sometimes opportunities that are posted there that would be of interest to an individual. But LinkedIn is such a good technology site, and a lot of organizations are leveraging that tool to identify new individuals, and it's where my team spends a lot of time looking for people, and it's one of the big platforms I would recommend.
Yeah, and I'd say also LinkedIn is extremely critical and important, and being engaged in the technology community is a great place to do that while virtual, right? And having a virtual network, doing virtual career fairs, virtual networking is extremely important right now. I have a number of colleagues that I'm working with, candidates that I've heard have created virtual coffee chats with other people in their network once a week. They'll get together and they'll say, okay, what are you hearing in the market? What, have recruiters reached out to you about specific jobs? Do you know who's hiring? Advice, mentorship, coaching, just a general tap on the market. And they do this once a week, coffee chats, right? And that is extremely important. It has worked really, really well for them. But you have to stay relevant. You've got to get creative. Video resumes, and I think we'll touch on resumes a little bit, but video resumes have been increasing. But really just getting out there in a virtual way and getting creative and LinkedIn is a really good platform and tool to do that.
Yeah, and so just a quick follow on that, as a hiring manager, when I'm playing that role, I often will go straight to the LinkedIn profile, and the resume plays into it, but it's flipping a coin as far as which one I go to first. And now I may not be normal, so you guys tell me if I'm normal or not, but I'll often look at the activity and just say, like, have they been engaging in anything that remotely relates to this job? Are they actually interested in it as part of their life, or is it just something that they applied to, but they're interested in other stuff? Is that normal? Like, is it important to think about what you like or don't like on LinkedIn? Is it important to post stuff regularly or not regularly? How much does that matter? Are there tricks with just how to experience LinkedIn that would matter from a recruiting standpoint?
I think you want to stay engaged, right? You want to show passion and focus, right? It's not necessarily there's a right or a wrong on how many times you post or like things. That's not necessarily important, but it's really around staying engaged with your community members, as well as really showing your passions and interests. So if you have a digital portfolio, put it on there. That's great. Anything that is going to show your technical aptitude, the roles and responsibility, your passion, your attitude, your aptitude, and staying engaged. Absolutely. It's a great place to do that. There's no right or wrong answer on how many times or how much content or whatever that may be, but just be yourself and show some passion and attitude. That's it. Yeah.
Cool. Very cool.
Another thing I'd like to touch on that, and that employers are on LinkedIn a lot, and they're looking at these specific profiles, and the context is they haven't seen your resume yet. And if your profile is not attractive enough, they may never engage with you and you may never have an opportunity to have a resume in front of them. So we want to make sure that it's relevant, it's clean, make sure you have, like Jennifer said, the right interest in there, whether it's a URL to your portfolio or whatever it is. Let's make sure that, it's professional and it's in a specific space that you'd like to go, because that is a first impression. They may pass over your LinkedIn profile if it doesn't capture, the right attention.
Yeah, definitely something to consider. And for those of us who've had LinkedIn profiles forever, it's one of those things you kind of set it and forget it. And it's important to go back and update that. Now, Jennifer, you mentioned something about a video resume. I'm intrigued by that. Either one of you, do you want to kind of explain what a video resume is, how that plays in? And then maybe broader, you could just talk about resumes in general. What are tips and tricks? How's that changed over time?
Sure. Chris, did you want to take that one?
If you want to start with the video resume, and then I'll touch on tips and tricks, would be great.
Sure. So video resumes, we've seen a lot of people starting to do this just to get creative and stand out in a crowd. And it is a elevator pitch, right? It is not long. It is a 2 to 3 minute video that introduces yourself, tells a little bit about your background, maybe make it a little personalized, show your personality a little bit, of course, keep it professional, and what you're interested in, what you're looking for, right? Where do you feel that and how you can make an impact within a company? It is your elevator pitch in a resume video format. And people post that on LinkedIn. We've been seeing a lot of that. People may embed it in their resumes, right? And we've seen so many different ways and applications of leveraging social media and really just try to cut through the clutter and get creative. So I think it's great.
Yeah, awesome. Now the resume as a whole, this is one, like, I remember probably everybody had to do this your senior year of high school, and there was nothing to put on it. It was a big pain. And then you updated it after college or whatever. And it's always like this dreaded thing to go update your resume and all that. Chris, what's some tips you have on resumes?
Resumes, that's an 800-pound gorilla, as you can imagine, right? So we could spend hours talking about resumes, and we'd love to help as many people as we can, and we constantly give advice and guidance. And I always know my audience and know these are not resume expert writers, so we want to help and counsel. And even great, fantastic, very successful people in our technology space sometimes need some advice on resumes. So just a couple of things. Titles are so subjective that I always tell candidates, let's focus on the responsibilities of what you did at the specific role. Let's, the exact duties you had. Let's put in the right technologies. Let's make sure that we're describing a day in the life of what you did in that specific role. And then secondly, which I think is also important, we give candidates and consultants advice on listing accomplishments that they're proud of, things that they've done, whether it's reduce spend, increase productivity. In any context, I was employee of the month or whatever it is, if you could list some accomplishments in that specific time, because we've seen some resumes where an individual's been there for 6 years and there's 2 bullet points. And we're like, well, where's the rest of the description, right? So managers don't want the 10 to 12 page resumes, but also they want to see a little bit of the context of the roles and responsibilities you were responsible for. And then also, maybe just a couple of key accomplishments at each specific role that you were proud of, that you got recognized for, that really had value to the company and impacted the organization and the group you were in.
Yes, it's so important to do that. Just from a hiring manager is going to be looking at that, looking to see what you've done, not like what you've actually accomplished, not your day-to-day, here's what my job description was. So I think that's a key thing on that. Okay, cruising along to the to next topic here, where again, a lot more people looking for jobs than jobs up to this point. It seems like we're transitioning, and that's going to hopefully have a different thing in the future. But I've had several of my friends contact me and say, man, I have been, whatever, it's an Agile transformation leader, but I haven't got a role for that. There's a Scrum Master role available. Should I take it? Or the opposite, or corollary to that. Usually if I'm contract, my rates, whatever, $150 an hour, but it seems like the rate now is $90 an hour. So I guess the question is, should people take a step back in their career just to have work and have income, or, what should they do in that? And then similar with rates and all that kind of stuff. What do you do with that?
I think it's important to not undervalue yourself, but be realistic and open-minded. It's not always about titles, right? And there is much more that goes into compensation just other than a salary or a rate, and other things that are important to you. Is it work-life balance? Is it, the type of company, what you're doing, getting to work on a new initiative, digital transformation, right? And what is the long-term growth opportunity? So, stay strong, don't undervalue yourself. This is just a moment in time and things are going to shift back quickly and there will be opportunities, but I understand that it can get a little frustrating sometimes, but you want to make sure that this is not just a job during this moment in time, but it is a long-term opportunity. So if that means a little bit of a lesser salary, a different role, or title, whatever that may be, what else is important to you? And think about those things, and that should be some value right there. But really looking at the opportunity as a long-term strategy, a long-term opportunity.
Yeah, great. And so, and I guess there is, if you're focused more on role and what you're doing rather than job title, that becomes a little less important. And it's easier to explain what you did and how you added value. I'm curious, one of the things I've often wondered, you have a pay history, right? So just as an example, let's say you were working in a 2018 at $100,000 a year, you're laid off, and this year you take a role at $70,000 a year because you just needed something to do, and then 18, maybe 20 months down the road, you're looking for opportunities again. Does taking that role at 70K per year mean that you're not going to be eligible for over 100K? Is there a history that the employer can see on your pay profile to say, well, we'll give you a little bit more, but not a little bit more from 2 jobs ago? Does that play in at all, or is it more just
in the same company? Right now, we are seeing that the market rates and salaries, a construction of that. I mean, that's just the nature of supply and demand. So it is important to understand that, right? But as a recruiter, I cannot legally ask you, hey, give me all, your 10-year pay history, right? And you don't have to provide me that information, right? There's no way that I can, validate that. However, so I wouldn't let that stop you, but it's really more about you and what your goals are, what your motivators are, and looking at the bigger picture in terms of compensation, but also being realistic that this is the market. And, sometimes the market shifts and changes, and we have to, let the market guide us to some degree in where that threshold might be from, a package perspective.
that makes sense?
Yeah, and I think it's important also to be very discerning. Even during this time, I always tell individuals, let's not panic. I know, it's a little tough if you've been out of work for a long period of time and you're not finding the right role, because you don't want a situation where you take so many levels back. Your journey to get back and reset your level is going to be even that much harder. So it's very important, but always be patient, right? I know it's really hard during a time like this, but just know the market is getting better, and there are a lot of things you can do in the meantime to self-improve, whether it's reading technology books or attending certain user groups or connecting with the right individuals. But you want to make sure that Jennifer made a point on this earlier, not underselling yourself, not underselling your value, and you may have to take a little bit of a step back on compensation, but I would never panic, and I would never be desperate and take, a third of your salary that you were making before, half your salary you used to make before. It's going to make that climb and journey that much harder. So I think it's important to still be discerning and still have the same mindset. I want to find a great company where I can add value. I want to find a company that there is longevity. I want to find a company that recession proof and will continue to grow and is heading in the right direction, irrespective of the times we're in. You still want to have a very discerning nature and be selective. And as you're going through the vetting process, you are interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. And we want to make sure, just because the supply and demand is a little off right now, let's not forget to be really discerning and make sure you choose the right organization, because you'll thank yourself in the end. And, we have some companies that tell us they are going to reset rates at some point. Right now, this is where we are, and we all have to accept that, but there will be a time when they'll reset. And, if you're part of that organization, you'll be reset as well. So I think it's just important to keep that in mind.
Yeah, it makes sense. I know it can be a damaging thing on your resume to take a really short term, I was there for 3 months or 6 months, and well, why'd you leave? Well, I didn't have enough pay. That can be hard to explain in a work history interview and get someone to take a risk on you in the future. So good advice there, not just to immediately settle. Chris, you're kind of bridging into some of the things you can do while you're waiting. And so, if you don't have a job, I know it can be a full-time job finding the next job. And so, certainly there's interviews, resumes, updating LinkedIn profile, all that stuff. But if you've done that and you still have some time, maybe the pipeline's a little dry, what are some things you'd recommend in the meantime?
No, that's great. And it does come up in conversation, believe it or not, when you're in front of the client 3 months, 6 months from now. Hey, how did you occupy your time? What did you do in your off time? Because they want to know, and it tells a little bit about your character and personality. So to address your question, reading, doing a lot of research, maybe reading for us, reading technology books, maybe you're taking classes to get a specific certification, joining user groups, really staying close to the technology, staying close to the community. But from what I've seen and the candidates that I've spoken to recently, it's reading technology books and working on certifications that are applicable for them. So if we have a project manager, I'm working on getting my CSM, Certified Scrum Master. I'm working on my ITIL certification. I'm working on a PMP. I didn't have time to do it before because I was so busy with the role I was in. Now I have some time, and it's going to look great because if we do fast forward 6 months from now and a manager's decide who to hire, and there's 2 different candidates, one that for 6 months really doesn't have much to say on what they did and how they occupied their time and the responses. I was just looking for a job. And then you have the other individual, I really wanted to self-improve. I read these specific books. I attended this user group. I worked on the certification. I got certified in this specific area. It stands out a little bit better. And if I were the manager, I'd be pretty excited and said, this person's really passionate about the space, and they took the time to self-improve during the time when they were looking for another opportunity.
That's great. So on the vein of certifications this year, just having, in my role, I'll do training and be able to offer training classes for certifications. I've noticed an uptick on people funding their own admittance into that class where, usually it's a company or someone that might be funding that. So if you're out of work, every dollar counts. Does it make sense to fund some certifications? If so, which ones seem to stand out or to add some value to that?
I think it's subjective to the role that you're going for. So obviously I mentioned a few. If you're in the project management space, the CSM is very important, the PMP, the ITIL certification. We have a big concentration on development. So there's, Java, for example, there's Java development certifications, Sun certifications you can get. If it's going to help you in your career and it's going to be of value and benefit to you, then I would say it's worth pursuing. And I understand the finances may be tough, but it's a differentiator in some companies. This individual is certified, this one is not. Some companies, that's a big deal. Jennifer, do you have any context on certifications you want to touch on?
Absolutely. I think that certifications are going to vary in importance based upon the role as well as the company. Some companies say that they really don't care certifications or not, and others that's extremely important to them. I think it's more about where you're leveraging your time today, and are you still growing? Are you still expressing an interest and a passion and desire to learn, right? And grow your skill sets. There are also a lot of very good free ways to do that too. So LinkedIn assessments is a great way to develop your skills. They've got training on many different topics. May not be as granular as or niche as some of the skill sets, but there's other ways to say, okay, I want to learn about, let's say, negotiating skills, or there's a plethora of stuff, and most of them are free, and you can post that on LinkedIn once you've completed it. So we've seen a lot of that going on. So get creative, and if it's something that you've always wanted to do but never had the time to do it, don't do it. That absolutely. But don't also forget about that. Spending your time on networking right now is critical as well. And going through these certification, it's also a good place to network too.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, down to just 8 minutes left. Oh man, so I want to get into how do you nail video interviews? Because that's something that hasn't been a big thing, years and years ago. Maybe it was like, come interview, but then there's this one person remote, we'll do a group interview with them, but that's the norm now. So any advice on prepping for and really nailing that interview?
Of course. And it was different for us because before this, very rarely would we have to prep a candidate or a consultant for a video interview. So we had to learn as well. We had to get really smart quickly on just learning what are the best ways to conduct a video interview. And it's a different setting because you're not face to face with the hiring manager. So body language is very important. Your personality really needs to come through and be very engaging. And sometimes it's a group call, so there's more than one individual, but you have to treat it as if it's a face-to-face interview and make sure that, your gestures are appropriate, and, the body language is important. And there's some tactical things, like make sure you have a clean background, make sure you're, dressed professionally, make sure there's no noise in the background, that type of thing. Make sure you're solely focused on the interview itself, but just make sure that body language, gestures, those are really important things to look at when conducting the video interview, because you want them to get to know you. And it's a short setting. It may be 30 minutes and maybe an hour, but that's your interview, and that's your chance to really impress this hiring manager. And, we try to focus on the important things that would happen if you were in an in-person interview. Jennifer, do you want to capture a couple of things on that as well?
Sure. So I think being prepared is extremely critical, and that's not just from a technology perspective. It's doing research on the company, who you're meeting with, and most importantly, having your story down and making sure that story is clear and concise. Because you only have 30 minutes and it is a video interviewing, so you lose some of that human interaction. So try to make it human, and it's okay to be human. Okay, it's okay. We are all very familiar with our dogs coming into our meetings, with our kids coming into our meetings, with our, significant other screaming in the background because they're on a work call. We know the kids, asking, hey, their teacher hung up on them on their virtual school, whatever that may be. We're familiar with this, and that is okay. But you do want to be prepared and minimize distractions as much as possible. When these things happen, don't sweat it. And the same goes for your interview, or, when something may happen with them on their side, don't sweat that, joke it off, laugh it off, so break the ice a little bit, and it's okay. But, another thing is it is really, really critical. Clients are interviewing for those soft skills that I mentioned, and that is collaboration, communication, ability to work from home remotely. Have you done that in the past successfully? Leave that in. That's important. Being flexible, adaptive, having a positive attitude, and having patience. These are all things that are really critical now in our workforce because we are all virtual. So have stories and to share around that. Really clear, specific examples. And that goes for any interview setting, but very clear, specific examples. But you'll see more behavioral type interviewing around these specific key skill sets. These strengths, to showcase those strengths specifically because they're really important. Also prepare for whiteboarding. That's a big one. We see a lot of whiteboarding going on right now. So get familiar with how to whiteboard, how to navigate a whiteboard session, via virtual interview. But there are so many other tips and tricks on nailing an interview. I think it's really about preparation, knowing your audience. Be okay with, things may happen. It's technology. It doesn't always work out the way we want to, but also really showcasing your strengths and really telling your story in a very clear, concise way with very specific examples.
Yeah. So to that end, you're in a video interview, right? In a real interview, you would always make eye contact, right? Like that would be a tip number one, like, don't stare out the door when you're talking to someone over there. In a video interview, though, sometimes depending where your camera is, you may be looking at the person, but if the camera's over here, they're only seeing your side. Is it important to consider some of that and maybe like think through camera placement, or heck, even buy a camera that could be placed right? How big a deal is that? The technology, the studio that you're doing the interview in.
Sure. So I think it is, everybody is very understanding right now, very compassionate. We're all going through the same thing and all trying to figure it out at the same time, right? So whether or not you have a video, a camera, I mean, you could go get a camera, Amazon, probably, $30, right? You could do that. Is it necessary? No, to get a webcam. But it is important to at least try to practice where you're looking. I mean, I know even in this setting, like, where do I look? I'm looking at a screen, I'm looking over here, and it does kind of change, especially when in a panel interview setting, as people change, your squares, your Hollywood squares start changing around too. But, everybody understands. So have compassion, give yourself some grace. It's going to be okay, but do your best to try to practice where you're looking at the interview. But if you just keep it engaged and bring out your personality and say, hey, I'm looking at you, this Hollywood square. Oh, hi, just make it lighthearted, right? And it's okay. That's okay. Everybody understands.
Chris had mentioned dressing professionally. And so I've seen, like, there's one viral post, LinkedIn a couple weeks ago, where the person had changed their profile picture to better match their day to day. And it's like, my old profile picture was this big professional thing. My life's, a lot more disjointed now. So I'm going to, have my hair more messed up and maybe a sweatshirt on or something like that. In your interview, you never want to show up in a tuxedo to an in-person interview, but you also don't want to show up in your t-shirt. Is it click down for video interviews since we're working from home now, or is it still the same kind of business professional? What's the right level on that?
Yeah, I think it's subjective to the client, right? Because we have some clients that are very, very casual, and we have some more professional clients. So I think knowing your audience is going to be very important. I rarely tell any consultants or candidates or my team to ask the respective community to wear suits, right? I think those are a little bit dated. So business professional, sometimes a blazer, definitely a collared shirt, combed hair, professionally shaven, some of the logistical things. But it is subjective to your audience, but not the ripped up t-shirts and, shuffled hair and not shaved, that type of thing. It's still professional. Like I said, this is your only shot to have FaceTime with a hiring manager. So we want to make sure that, we're professional in that setting. But this is a different world we're in, different times we're in. This is different for them doing these types of interviews. So don't stress too much about it. But from a dress standpoint, business casual is the direction we give candidates.
Yep, and don't be surprised if your interviewer is in a t-shirt. Okay.
Yeah.
Feel that, and that's okay too. But you are the one that is looking to impress, right? But don't forget that you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. Okay, you don't undervalue yourself. You want to make sure it's the right fit. Come prepared with lots of questions, and then don't sweat the small stuff.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking at our time box and we're up against it. You guys have done great in this interview. Way to go. That was really good. If folks listening in want to follow, find out more about G Squared or be in touch with you guys, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
We'll provide all of our contact information to you if you want to post it to the forum on Agile. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, reach out to us on LinkedIn. We'll give you all of our contact information. Let us know if there's any other questions. If there are questions that you've had through the chat session, Danny, Chrissy, if you want to put those together, we can answer them through the forum. Anyway, feel free to reach out to us. But thank you so much. We really, really have enjoyed this, and we look forward to connecting with all of you.
Yeah, thanks so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it.